Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to get a little bit bloody, a little bit salty, and I also have a balloon. Let's talk about you and your hypertension. So let's start out with the definition. So this is divided into two words. The first word is hyper, so that's when there's too much, over the top. Just like when you're feeling a bit hyper, you're feeling overly excited. The second part is tension. So tension usually occurs when there's pressure or when something is getting stretched out. There's a lot of tension. So when we're talking about hypertension in our body, we're talking about the pressure that our blood puts on our blood vessels. So hypertension is when our blood pressure is too much. So the tension that our blood puts on our blood vessels is too much and it causes damage to our body. So we need three things to make our blood pressure. We need our heart, we need the blood, and we need our blood vessels. So this is where my balloon comes in. So this is going to be your blood vessels. I'm going to be your heart, and the air that I push out is going to be your blood. So if you've ever had your blood pressure taken, they usually give you two numbers. So let's say you get 120/80, but what does this actually mean? We actually call this 120/80 millimeters of mercury. And the reason we use mercury is because the first guy who invented the machine that measures our blood pressure in the 1870 somethings, a guy in Italy, he used to use mercury to measure it. But now the machines that we use don't use mercury. And the name of the machine that we use is called a sphygmomanometer. So what do these numbers mean? So remember, these are your blood vessels, and your blood vessels are a little bit like a balloon. They have the ability to expand and contract. So when you push blood into it or you push air into it, it's able to expand. So I'm the heart. I need to get the blood inside of me into your blood vessels and to the rest of the body. So the pressure that I use to push that air out into here, that's the top number. Now I need to get more air back into my body, and the pressure within me is that bottom number. So normal blood pressure should be under 120 and under 80 millimeters of mercury. Hypertension is when you get sustained elevation of blood pressure. That means when you go get your blood pressure taken and it ends up being over 130 and over 80, and you have your blood pressure taken maybe 2 or 3 times and it's still above these numbers, then that's hypertension. So how does this happen? Actually, the proper mechanisms of how this happens is not really known. We just know there are lots of different things that can make your blood pressure go up, but I'm going to talk about 2 of the main ways that this can happen. So it can happen with the heart. So if I'm pushing harder or pushing faster, that means I'm using a lot more pressure to get the blood out of me. I'm using a lot more energy, I'm using a lot more pressure to get that blood into the blood vessels. So what can make the heart work harder and make it use more pressure to get this blood out? Certain things like obesity and lack of exercise make your heart work harder. So obesity, if you have more mass, if you have more parts of your body, your heart has to supply those parts of your body. So it has to work harder to get blood where it needs to go. And why would exercise affect how your heart works? Your heart is a muscle, just like any other muscle in your body. For it to be strong and work better, you have to work it out. This is like if you were to put me and Usain Bolt and tell us to run a 100-meter race. His body is a lot more conditioned to do this race. Mine is not. He can run it with his eyes closed with no effort whatsoever. If I was to do that, I'd probably pass out, get a cramp, and probably not make it to the end because my body is not strong enough to put in that kind of effort. I would have to work a lot harder to run the same race that he is. This is the same for our heart. If we're not exercising and if we're overweight, our heart is having to work a lot harder just to get blood where it needs to go. Another mechanism that can lead to hypertension is when there's increased blood volume. So that's the same as if I was to take a massive breath and push all the air out of my lungs into this balloon. That is a lot of pressure. That's going to increase the pressure inside this blood vessel. I'm going to try and see what happens. That's all the air that I could get out of my lungs. So if you feel this balloon, it's stretched out. There's a lot more tension because there's a lot more pressure inside of this balloon. So what can make your blood volume increase? This is where salt comes in. This is why we are recommended to decrease the amount of salt that we eat. Salt and water are best friends. Wherever salt goes in our body, water always follows. This reminds me of when I was younger, me and my little sister. I was the salt, she was the water. Wherever it is I had to go, she was there. If I had to go to a friend's house, she was there. Wherever it is we were, she would always be with me. We get rid of salt and water through our kidneys, through our urine. But if we're taking in a lot of salt, we're not able to take it out at the same time. So this means we're having a lot of salt in our bodies. That means water's not leaving our bodies. And last week I talked about the different parts of the blood. So about 55% is plasma and almost 90% of plasma is water. So if we end up having more salt in the plasma, we're going to end up with more water in the plasma. So this increases the amount of blood in our vessels. So if there's more blood, there's more pressure inside of our blood vessels. So what happens, we end up spending maybe 10, 15, 20 years of having a high salt diet, not working out, being overweight, and then we end up with hearts that are working harder, and we end up with increased blood volume. Our body tries to compensate for all of this. So just like the balloon, if you keep blowing in more air or you keep blowing harder and faster, what's going to happen? It's going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually the pressure inside of this balloon will be too much for the balloon and it's going to burst. Our body tries to make sure that does not happen. So what our body does, which balloons can't do, is so to make sure that our blood vessels don't overexpand like the balloon does, and then maybe we get a burst blood vessel or a tear in the blood vessels. We have muscles on the inside of our blood vessels. So the muscles contract to make sure the pressure of the inside doesn't overexpand our blood vessels. So this is a normal temporary way of protecting our blood vessels. But when hypertension goes on for a very, very, very long time, just like any muscle that we work out on our body, if you keep lifting weights, your muscles are going to get stronger and they're going to get bigger. This is kind of what happens in our blood vessels, because eventually what happens, they get thicker and bigger, and it means your blood vessel gets stiffer and it's not able to expand or work as it was supposed to. And also all the blood rushing inside of your blood vessel, it starts to damage the inside of your blood vessels. Probably the organs that are supposed to be getting all of this blood supply are not getting enough. Specifically your kidneys. So your kidneys are very good at sensing if there's enough blood in your body. When it feels it's not getting enough blood supply, it's very smart, because what it does, it's like, oh, there's not enough blood supply, we need more blood. So it makes sure it increases the amount of blood volume by retaining all the water. So it makes you hold on to the water instead of peeing out all your water. So now you've got increased blood volume, and other parts of your body also sense you're not getting enough blood. So they make your heart beat faster and beat harder to get more blood out. So this is why it's a vicious cycle. So we start again with too much blood. You have increased blood volume, and then your heart is having to work harder. But then because of that, your blood vessels are contracting a lot more and they're getting more damaged on the inside. And then that means your organs are not getting all the blood they need. And when they sense that, they make your heart work harder and they increase your blood volume. And you end up with this vicious cycle of your heart is working harder, your blood vessels are getting damaged, your organs are trying to get your heart to work harder, and it goes on and on and on. And this can go on for many years without you feeling anything. And there are many other things that can contribute to hypertension. So things like smoking and alcohol are known to add to the damage to your blood vessels. They make your heart work harder as well. And other things which we really can't control, like aging. The older you are, the more likely you are to have hypertension. And also family history, genetics. If you have a family history of people like your parents, your brothers or your sisters who have hypertension, then it means you're a bit more prone to getting hypertension. And this cycle is so important. A lot of the treatment for hypertension is based on trying to prevent these things from happening. The first thing, the main thing, which is seen in most chronic diseases, is the lifestyle, because it's a lifestyle that leads to a lot of these changes. We have to adapt and we have to change our lifestyle. It's like our diet, it needs to be low salt, decrease the amount of bad fats that we're eating more plants, eating more fresh food, and of course exercise as well. Since hypertension is silent and you never really know you have it until either you get the signs and symptoms, and sometimes that means this damage that's already occurring in your body, or you get tested. It's recommended that most people, adults, go get tested once a year, and also being aware, especially if hypertension is something that runs in your family. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope me and my balloon have been able to give you some insight in how blood pressure works and how hypertension can happen, and that we do have control into preventing these diseases from occurring, whether it's 10, 20, 30 years from now. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.